Oh yeah, sexy biscuits. Nice.
Long Boys Blues, 1975. YouTubers on the rise. Reviewing games, rated I, and sometimes friends. But Long Boys Blues, 1975.
Hey YouTube, Numbers Post 1975. Not really a nostalgic memories video as such, although there is a lot of nostalgic memories in this, but kind of a question to you. I mean, this is a very subjective question, isn't it? Basically, which is, what was the greatest, or when were the greatest gaming days of your life? Because that would depend upon many sort of variants and things like that. But I think there's one aspect of it that simply, for those of us who say that our childhood days were the best gaming days of our lives, would be school. An aspect of it where you literally did not actually play games. Alright, we had computer schools and stuff like that. We used to play BBC Micros. I know. At lunchtime and stuff like that, and a bunch of schools would have that. So that, that there is a form of gaming, and obviously kids would bring in, handheld games and stuff like that. And I mean literally LCD and LED and stuff like that. A few years later, if you were lucky, you would see a couple of Game Boys, maybe an Atari Lynx. But what I like about school is it was kind of like its own ecosystem, really. That the majority of school was nothing to do with physically hands-on gaming, but without it, your childhood gaming experience would not have been anywhere near as good as it was, assuming that the answer to this question for you is my childhood days, because for some people it'll be college days as well. One thing I would like to know is, do kids even swap games anymore? If you have kids, do your kids swap games at school? I genuinely don't know. But anyway, I want to talk about my school days, and just kind of generalize here a bit as well. But what was great about school, and what you got to remember, is how it was a perfect accompaniment, is the word I'm looking for, accompaniment to your gaming, because you would game in the evenings after school. Friends would come over from school, you'd have tea and stuff like that. But you'd game it in the evenings. In the summer holidays, you'd game all day long. You'd game at the weekend. But the bit that I've always loved, my memories of school, was basically, it was a shop. You could purchase games there. It was a rental store. You could rent games before, and I mean for free basically, but you could rent games way before rentals ever made it into the high street in this country, because they were very late to the party. I don't remember seeing games to rent until very early 90s, maybe even as late as sort of around like 93, 94. I'm sure like in North America and the rest of the world, it kicked in far before then. But so essentially you had a rental, aspect to your your little ecosystem. There was a review department. Kids would tell you whether games were good or not. There was a hype department where kids would just like just like themselves hype the shit out of a game, clearly exaggerate it. They probably very much enjoyed it, but that's what kids do. They would exaggerate stuff. They'd overlook faults, sorry, Windy Pops, and flaws, and not be as savage, as cynical as adults are when it comes to games. And also there'd be an entertainment department, playground wars, where kids would vehemently defend their system of choice, rubbishing the other systems, rubbishing the individuals who owned it, defending their graphics and stuff like that, often having no knowledge of the tech specs whatsoever, other than the fact that there was a 64 or a 48 attached to the name. And they would savage people that more often than not would be their best friends. I remember at primary school some of the fiercest arguments we had, the Spectrum kids against the Commodore 64 kids in, first break and lunch break on the lunch tables. Absolutely fantastic fun. You'd even make fact up, let's be honest. But a whole bunch of people at my primary school had Commodores and ZX Spectrums, and that would be where the lending games kick in. That was an absolute treat, Because you got to remember, before you realised that you could just tape to tape, and often once you knew that you could tape to tape, this became your resource for expanding your game library. I have done a video on, you know, nostalgic memories of the days you used to record or tape to tape games for your computer. But when you found out a buddy of yours had a specific game and you would strike that deal and it would end in a handshake, you would, you know, batter out. Sometimes you'd have to lend a couple. If someone knew they had a premium title, like we used to make people lend us a bunch of stuff. Well, my brother would lend them Robocop on the ZX Spectrum, and same with me for Batman, the movie on the ZX Spectrum. But yeah, once that deal was done, sealed with a handshake, it was genuine excitement the next day, and an excruciating wait to make it through all your lessons, all day, all lessons, knowing that you're... And the other thing that would be really kind of, you know, pensive and nerve-wracking was, did your mate remember to bring the game in? Did he remember to bring the game in? We always used to put our game on our packed lunches, you know, before we used to have dinner, well, school dinners. Because you'd have to remember it, wouldn't you? You would absolutely have to remember it. But yeah, so the number of times when they didn't show up with a game and you were absolutely devastated, and you know, and it wasn't a big deal to them, even though, you know, and they begged you, lend me your game, lend me your game. No, I'm not lending you fuck all. Only I wouldn't have sworn. Until, you know, until I've got your game in my hand, got like that. And yeah, and then obviously you only ever have to wait one more day. But yeah, they're making it through all the lessons and that, and you know, whipping it out, school, the, you know, first break and lunch break, and just looking at it and reading the back cover, you know, like somehow that was gonna make the day go quicker than getting home and, you know, obviously playing it. That was brilliant. Like I said, that was your rental store before there were rental stores for video games. And the number of games that we used to borrow off people was ridiculous. And then you would obviously tape them. And I actually knew a kid, don't tape it, don't tape it. How do I know you're not going to tape mine? And so this is what I mean about you. This was not a gaming experience. You were not physically playing games when you were, you know, sat there at school with this game burning a hole in your hand. But looking back upon it as an adult, it made school bearable, but it also made the whole, you know, your childhood gaming days that much better. Borrowed so many games. And so also, you know, you got to remember, you were exposed to other systems. You know, I think I got to see a Commodore 64 once at primary school and once at secondary school, going over a mate's house for tea. That was obviously hands-on gaming, which is not so much what I want to talk about in this video. And then there was obviously the stuff where you read magazines together. Reading magazines has kind of gone by the way thanks to the internet. They're still out there, you can still buy them, but that was a massive thing. One kid would have one copy of a magazine and you'd read it. It'd be a communal read. You reading it, people sat behind you, go to the next page, go to the next page. Is this the magazine where they review said game? Again, you're not physically playing a game at this point, but this was unbelievably good fun. Social reading of a magazine, a game magazine. I can't tell you how many times we genuinely look forward to a kid bringing in CVG at secondary school, and especially when a CVG complete guide to console books came out. I kept them for years, even though I threw out all my other gaming mags, and I wish I still had them. I think they're worth a fortune now. I don't know if they've been repeated, I don't know if, you know, reprinted, I don't know if you can buy them like in a big fat compendium or something. But when those books came out, and this again, you weren't playing games, but you were experiencing the first time of another market, Japanese consoles you've never even heard of. You know, like the PC Engine and stuff like that, and also British ones, you know, and stuff that would never come out and failed, like the Conix multi-system. Who remembers that? Going to buy it with a chair that moves. Back then, that was ambitious. Again, you weren't playing fuck all, but you tell me that you did not enjoy that moment of magazines and CVG and seeing what other systems there were as much as playing a game back then. And also being, this was a great aspect, and true, you know, it makes me sound like a dickhead, but the snobbery you could have, especially me, when you were pretty much sure that you were the only kid for a very long time to have a Mega Drive. And you got to remember, there were probably only 700 kids at my secondary school, but yeah, and have it ahead of time, and you know, because it was a Japanese one that you imported. I'm not going to go into that whole story because you know all about it, but the point being, you're not playing games there. But my God, was that an enjoyable feeling to be an absolute snobby bastard looking down on people, you know, deciding who could come over your house. But that obviously was a double-edged sword, because there wasn't anyone you could trade games with. But when you finally got someone, when you went from a system where, you know, you had rentals all over the shop to literally one other person, that made the whole experience of trading games even more exciting. Absolutely, like, that really was. And even though you're older at this point, I'm more like 12 when I've got my Japanese Mega Drive, you know, you're still essentially a child, but you're not, you know, as young as you were at primary school. But you still turned into a gibbering wreck, hoping that your mate would remember to bring the game in. Because again, this is where the kind of, you know, rental aspect of lending games, you know, analogy, sorry, really kicked in. Because Mega Drive games were 35 quid in 1988 for me, and and there were import shops and stuff like that. But this was the only way you could experience a lot of games. I mean, I had a pretty sizable Mega Drive collection by the end of its days. But if it wasn't for the supplement of, you know, lending games at school, you know, you would have experienced so little. That was, and yeah, like I said, that was crippling. If someone genuinely forgot that game then, and you had to wait a whole extra day, that would absolutely, you know, kill you. But that was something else I loved about school, which wasn't you playing a game. That's the whole point of this video, and that how this is the perfect complement to childhood gaming was, you know, on the school bus, you know, often where you would trade games, but on the school bus going home, bringing out this game. I remember bringing out my because I got it back off my friend, and I remember bringing out my copy of Michael Jackson's Moonwalker, Japanese. And Sony didn't even know what the Mega Drive was, but was a huge Michael Jackson fan. My friend Carlos, this was way before we became best mates, was like, holy shit, what's that? And then this wasn't the snobbery aspect, but again, something at school that you loved was like bringing someone into the fold, which is, this is Mega Drive. I didn't know that was a thing. Oh, it's not out yet, and stuff like that. But, you know, it's always 16-bit. Michael Jackson's got a game on it and stuff like that, and you have to do this, sharing your game experience, to kind of like the review, you know, side of things that I mentioned at the start, you know, analogy wise. But you know, explaining the game to someone, and, you know, and if you genuinely loved it, hyping the tits off it, because if you could convince someone else to buy a system, that was someone else you could borrow games off. So do you know what, like I said, and also striking a deal, this is what I meant, it was a shop. School was a shop. I bought a load of games at school, and I mean, lots of times people would, you know, you'd buy one, you'd copy it, you'd flog it, even as a kid, and so when you sold it, or someone, you know, or you bought one of someone else, it didn't really matter that you know, you didn't recoup all your money, and the other side of it being, you wouldn't necessarily pay full price for a relatively new game. But it was just because obviously you had a copy of it. But yeah, that aspect was, like I said, you know, you argued, your mates, Playground Wars, that was the entertainment, magazine, social reading, you know, that was just fun in itself. But then explaining to people other games, people explaining them to you, that was like the review aspect of it. These are all things that I have such fond nostalgic memories of, genuine warm memories of these experiences that completely complemented perfectly your childhood gaming. But none of it was actually physically sat down playing games. Like I said, sure, handhelds here and there, and schools like computer clubs. But the majority of school for people was, you know, lessons, and that was it. And that weren't related to computers and stuff like that. And so in itself, these things also helped you deal with the day, helped, you know, go through, you know, crap lessons that day and stuff like that. And if you weren't a massive fan of school, these are all things that helped you get through. But the main point of this video is, when people say what were the greatest days, your greatest gaming days, regardless of how old you are or what generation it is, I genuinely believe most people will say their school days. And why will they say their school days? Because all these things I mentioned, I guarantee there's a whole bunch of you out there who did exactly the same things we did, that I've just mentioned, at my school, my high school, my primary school. You know, all the way across the country. Doesn't matter. I guarantee every school had this. Whether kids do it or not now, I don't know. The internet has obviously destroyed, you know, a lot of this, like the social reading of magazines, which, to be fair, especially CVT and the Complete Guide to Console, was one of my absolute highlights of gaming as a kid, and probably the best fondest memory I have in this video here. But yeah, I guarantee there's a whole bunch of you across the country, wherever you were, whichever country, excuse me, Windy Pops, in the United Kingdom, exactly the same, did these things, experienced these things, you know, fought fist, you know, fist in a nail with people about whose system was better, borrowed games, crippling waiting experience to get home, bought games, you know, social read magazines, you know, I guarantee every crunchy, especially if you're my age, across every school across the country did these exact things. And that's why, to me, not just a question of gaming as a kid was the greatest days of gaming for me, but it's specifically the school days of gaming, even though a relatively massive amount of that time was game related things, but not actually physically playing a game, which is when a lot of people, what a lot of people think of when they try to answer the question, you know, which is what were the greatest days of gaming for you. So for me, easy, school. 100%, even though I argue a lot of it wasn't actually physically hands-on gaming. Waffled a little bit here, kind of got away from me, but I want to talk about this for ages because a bunch of people, excuse me, have always, you know, thrown this question at you when they find out that you got a YouTube channel, when you talk to people in comment sections and things like that, and across social media in general. People will always, you know, ask inevitably what were your greatest days or memories of your greatest days of gaming. And like I said, school for me, 100%. Anyway, as always, I'd love to know what you think, and thank you very much for watching, and I'll see you later.